Yeah, so recently there's been this discussion about Afrobeats.
Yeah.
So, as regards Afrobeats, do you think we need to name genres?
First things first, I really think generally that genres have to be named, yes. It's just like people, like, or anything. There's a reason why the word noun exists, or the concept of a noun exists, and there's a reason why it's named a noun. Because if you don't name it a noun, how do you then describe something that is used to name people or things or animals or whatever, right? Yeah. So the operative thing here is every phenomenon needs to be named. Like just like human beings, people, things that are happening, if we can't name things, then we might not be able to identify them or appropriately classify them. Look at it this way. At some point, some disciplines or education or courses used to be together, say like law or something. At some point it was law together. Now you have international and diplomacy. You have law on its own. You have some people studying a different type of law on its own. Like, so that the streams to understand some of these things are going to be easy to digest and understand. That's number one. Number two, from a marketing perspective, the moment you put an identity on anything, everything changes forever. Like, when people can identify a genre with something, you can push a movement to it, you can push a culture to it, you can push fashion to it, you can push style to it. For a long time, people couldn't understand what trap music was. And even trap music, the trap music that T.I. was making in 2003 or 2004 or 5 is the trap music that the Soulja Boys started making. In a way, it's an evolution of what T.I. was making. But the moment the world keyed into the idea of trap, everything changed. So it's the same thing with Afrobeats in this situation. The moment everybody could identify a word, marketing became a lot easier, because every genre across history, say whatever it is, say pop, rock, whatever, some of these genres also have sub-genres. There's a reason why sub-genres exist. And that's why a lot of songs tend to have like 3-4 genre descriptions. But there's usually one umbrella genre that might be able to capture everything else. Even though to properly adequately describe a genre, you are going to look at the sound, the type of beats, the way the person is flowing, the thing the person is saying. All of these things are very, very, they play into this thing. But in the terms of like Afrobeats, as we've reviewed on this show, sometimes certain descriptions make sense, some descriptions don't make sense. That's what it is.
For Afrobeats, Fela is the origin of Afrobeats.
Yeah.
But for Afrobeats, sounds new. Some people are even insulted by the word Afrobeats.
Yeah.
So what is the origin of the word Afrobeats?
The idea of Afrobeats is, yes, it's like different streams of consciousness that tie into the word Afrobeats. First things first, let's look at the idea, the history of Nigerian music, basically. A lot of people think that Nigerian music started with someone like Fela. No, it didn't start with Fela. Nigerian music has been existing before then, right? But there was high life before then. There was Apala before, there was Fuji before then. Music genres that start from like the Islamic religion, right? You are talking about local genres. Every location in my father's house in Ekiti State, there's a genre there. There's a sound. They call it Uduli. I've said it on the show before. Yes, right? Oh. So all of these things tie into the idea of Afrobeats, but there have been certain things over the years that led us to Afrobeats. So the name Afrobeat itself is a Fela thing. Fela came back, was making jazz music. Someone told him that, bro, she can work. What did he do? He traveled, fused. That man is a genius, by the way. Fused high life with funk, jazz, and elements of Nigerian music, and he made it into an entire genre, which is crazy, right? According to Tony Allen, a Ghanaian man in his band named it Afrobeats. But it depends on who you believe. His first girlfriend is going to say that she named it Afrobeats. Whatever. We shall know that it's Afrobeats, right? But over time, Fela's music sort of was exported. Like, white people could identify with it because it's unique, right? But it wasn't the only sound that was exported. There was a time, Southeastern rock bands, like in the 70s, 80s, there's a story I've told several on the show about Carlos Santana being a spectator in the crowd for OFO Black Company, a Nigerian rock band that was playing in Surrey, London, right? Those things have existed. And then in the 80s, Sonny Ade had his entire run, which was huge. Like a foreign label wanted to make Sonny Ade the replacement for Bob Marley, which is wild. When Bob Marley died, that was their replacement. It didn't work out, but he released 2 incredible albums, charted Billboard 200, had a Grammy run later in the 90s. But the thing, a Grammy nomination in the 90s. So the idea of the word Afrobeats became old. Fela is like the poster child for African quote and unquote pop music, like African popular music, right? As much as Afrobeat is not exactly as pop as Fuji or Akbala. People were listening to Fela, don't get me wrong, but in terms of pop music, which could soundtrack parties and shit, Fela's music was not exactly as pop as Akbala that was played at parties, elitist parties in Lagos, or Fuji that was played in the Borough party of Lagos, or High Life that was played everywhere on the east, or Ekpili, or Ogene, or Egedege. Some of this sound in the south, some of this, it's not as pop as those sound, but it's pop. But regardless, Fela is the is the height, the zenith of African music, of Nigerian music. Even in some ways, some people say African music. That is debatable, depending on who you believe. Like, they didn't say that, they say that. So, as things sort of progressed, then we moved into another era where Nigerian music sort of evolved. Hip hop and R&B came in, and then we had disco era, and then all of those things crystallized into an era where hip hop became the hip hop and R&B became the background sound for Nigerian pop sounds, like in the 70s, I mean in the 90s and the early 2000s. You hear a song like Plenty Things. That was a song that we were dancing to it back then. But that's a hip hop record. Listen to the beats. Yeah. It's a hip hop record, right? But then by the mid 2000s, a record, 4 albums dropped. I've said it several times on the show. Timaya's True Story, Nice's Gongaso, One Day Cole's Mushin to Moise, and the Band Entertainer, that sort of became the background or the template for Nigerian pop sounds. So get it like this: Nigerian music had been getting exported, right? Yeah. Nigerian music had been getting exported, but Nigerian music, African, not just Nigerian music, African music generally. Like, Nigeria has been succeeding, but then you had a lot of people, Manu Dibango, people like Mariam Makeba, all these people had their run in Europe and the US. Aside from Fela and Nigerian artists, you're talking about the guy that was featured on Burna Boy's album, I've forgotten his name, the Senegalese artist. Then we're also talking about Francophone artists, Apollo Longomba, Magic System, that had an entire run. They were like the poster boys for African sounds, like the early 2000s, 1999 to the early 2000s. They were big, right? Even Nigerian gospel artists were copying them. You remember now, right? So all these sounds are so multi-dimensional. They are far-reaching and wide-ranging. So to pinpoint them to something became an issue. Like, you need an identity because you know that this sound is going to have its time. And American music capitalism and foreign capitalism operate on the sense of when it gets to a level, they have to incorporate sounds into especially America, incorporate sounds into their soundscape or their ecosystem to make things propel, right? So we know that this sound is going to come at some point. So, and then it then became, for some reason, not for some reason, for a lot of reasons, Europe was where African music in contemporary times started to find some sort of foothold, right? Because first and second generation African immigrants, they had this greater sense of belonging to their African roots more than their American counterparts for a lot of reasons. People in France, for example, where they are half of, maybe not half, but they are like black communities, Africans, like people that they are French, maybe they are third or second generation, but they incredibly identify with the African roots. So those things made the growth of African music better in contemporary terms. So the acceptance or the coolness of it became a thing. So you are then looking at, to them appropriately understand these things, people have to understand this in a way. So we didn't create Afrobeats. We didn't name it Afrobeats. The UK named it Afrobeats. DJ Abranti, shout out to DJ Abranti, has been several times has been credited with being the person. A lot of people they disagree. A lot of people disagree, but there's a fight on that. But DJ Abranti is credited as the person that coined the word Afrobeats. It's Ghanaian, so you make some mixes, you make some things, and not knowing what to call it and needing something to call this African sounds and this playlist that he was doing, he had to name it something. So he named it Afrobeats, right? That is basically the origin of Afrobeats. Now, over the years, we have been fighting over this word. Africans don't want to be pigeonholed into the conversation of Afrobeats. Yeah. We don't want people to say, oh, it's just Afrobeats, because we are more than Afrobeats. But what Afrobeats then became is an umbrella genre to capture African contemporary pop sounds. That's what it became. Because for people like DJ Abranti, anybody that grew up in the UK, they will tell you that it wasn't always cool to be African. It's cool now. It wasn't always cool to be African. Like, a lot of them used to hide the fact that they were African. So I started to tell you that they used to call her fufu, some of these things. Yeah. Like, it wasn't cool. So a lot of these people had to pose like they were Caribbean. Like, that's why for a long time, Caribbean music influenced a lot of UK mainstream urban culture. Like bashments, some of these things, they have roots in the Caribbean sound. So these guys, when African sounds started coming through, like they started coming through, it made these guys be able to come out of their shell. Let's own our culture, our background, our heritage. Like, so they had to name their genres. They had to find something to name it for. We didn't like it. So the inability to pinpoint African contemporary sounds, the inability to pin them down to something, and the need to actually create an identity for these sounds, birthed Afrobeats. People just look like, okay, it's a lot of beats, it's a lot of sounds, it's a lot of genres. Yeah. Afrobeat is one genre that you can easily identify, but you can't identify Juju, you can't identify Fuji, you can't identify Akbala, you can't identify Sukus, you can't identify Dumba, Nigerian Lamba, Konto, Galala. Okay, let's just put them as Afrobeats. By common sense, it was a fantastic idea. Because we needed an identity for marketing, like I said the other time, for marketing, to put something behind it, to put a culture, potentially a culture behind it that Africans across the world could relate to, or that could resonate with them. It made sense. But for us, we didn't like it.
So essentially, Afrobeats is an umbrella term now for Afrobeats, and a whole lot more.
Yeah, it is an umbrella. It's an umbrella term. But the problem is, like, shout out to Izo Gozie of Empire. He always says something that Africa is more than Afrobeats, because right now Afrobeats is becoming some sort of you could say like an impediment to the genre, right? And people are just like white people used to pigeonhole any sort of urban music that Black people, African Americans, would make into hip hop, whatever that means, right? A lot of people are now pigeonholing anything that comes out of Africa as Afrobeats, even though visibly you can see that it's not Afrobeats. Sometimes it's not even a pop record. Yeah. People are basically rapping or song rapping. You are calling it Afrobeats. So it's not exactly their fault, because at the end of the day, it's beneficial to Africa that we have something like that as an identifier for us, right?
Okay, so what was this fight about, this Afrobeats versus Afrobeat?
Like I was saying the other time, a lot of people didn't want to accept it. Like, a lot of people felt like it was an oversimplification of African music, African pop music, right? Or even African music generally, because African music is so much, like the genres in Nigeria alone, you can't even trace them. Yeah. Talk less of Nigeria, Ghana, all these genres, and some of these things, right? It became hard for Nigerians to accept that. Why are you simplifying our music like this? But at the time, we didn't understand. It was a thing of ego, right? It was a thing of ego in the sense that we didn't want to accept that the simplification of a sound. But over time, it's proven to be a master stroke for us, for African music, especially as regards the exploitation of it. Like, African music, like we said severally on the show, the greatest identifier of African music is the percussion. Like the root of African music is percussion. And that's what a lot of these people realize that, okay, we know that this is African, but we don't know what it is. Do you understand what I mean? Like, once you hear an African record, you are going to know it's an African record. Even though Latin pop is similar to Afro pop, you will know that it's Afro because the drums are more aggressive. There's snares, there's shakers, there's a lot of things. They do all these things. Sometimes it's chaotic, right? That's why a lot of people might not be able to relate with it. That's why one dance, for example, was simplified, so that's why people will be able to easily relate to it or accept it, right? So it became a thing of, we don't want to accept this. Don't simplify our sound. Don't do this. Don't do that. But over time, it became hard for us to continue that fight because one, it became the biggest point for exportation of African music. And African music needed to be exported because look at what has been happening since Afrobeats to the world. Our music industry is growing. It's still not at the best point that it could be, but it's growing. There's way more funding, there's way more money in the industry now in terms of like money that's changing hands, in terms of money that is coming in, even to the smallest artists that can have access to the top. There's a lot of money there. And it also became hard because as African artists were getting signed to foreign labels also needed to identify them with something. So when those guys are seeing money, it's difficult to argue with the white man with the money. So we had no choice when it became, even African artists, the ones that had like the focal point of these movements, they were describing their music as Afrobeats. It's difficult for people at home to continue the fight. And it's not like Afrobeats completely doesn't make sense. It's just an oversimplification.
So you're saying we accepted it because of export and penetration.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a difference between Afrobeats and Afropop?
So what is pop music?
Popular music.
Pop music is just popular music. And popular music, in the African context, popular music is multifaceted in the African context, right? So popular music is juju, it's apala. In a way, it's Afrobeats, not without the S. It's high life. Because all this music are popular, it's what radio wants to play, it's what's soundtracking the young people, it's what the pulse of the young people is what they can relate with, what they can relate to, right? In a way, it goes to Dumba, it goes to songs across Africa, like Makossa, all these genres, Sukus, all of them. So all of them are pop music. Like, but the problem is, people didn't want to accept Afro-pop. Like people, all those guys, anything, because pop would have been too simple for them. Just say pop music. Now we'll be having problems with Afro-pop. We might not have had a problem with it then, but now we're having a problem with it. But it was also a thing of, we didn't have a name for, so after we found our contemporary pop sound, we didn't have a name for it because Nigerian pop sounds over the years have become some sort of multifaceted as well. So you're looking at Galala, Konto on one side, you're looking at hip hop, very fragmented. It's a lot of genres in one. So to then we didn't have a name for it, so all these people had to then create the sound for us. Now going back to what the fight between Afropop and Afrobeats is, these days they're interchangeables. They're interchangeables. Me personally, I prefer Afropop because I feel it's a better reflection of the music and it doesn't clash with Afrobeats. Till date, some people still have a problem understanding Afrobeats and Afrobeats, right? So it's Afropop for me is a step away from that, and it makes sense for me. But the thing is, a lot of people then have a problem. A lot of people are going to have a problem with it because you are looking at South Africans. In the real sense of the word, Afro house is pop music. Amapiano is pop music. It's popular music. So you can say if a white man, for example, is going to call it Afropop or Afrobeats, you might not, you will not have a problem with it because essentially, by common sense, it makes sense. But to us, South Africans are never going to accept it, ever. If you tell them Amapiano is Afrobeats, it's a problem. And guess why it's going to be a problem for them? Because we take me to the next point I'm going to make. A lot of people have pigeonholed Afrobeats to a Nigerian thing. Do you understand? So, Nigeria, you remember at the start of the year when Cameroon had the problems? Exactly. Like Cameroon had a problem with us. They did, like, it's not just a Cameroonian thing. Across, like, it was South Africa some time before that. you have to understand why. It's just like how people hate America. Aside from the fact that Nigerians we are flamboyant, we are loud, we are everywhere, we are scattered, we plenty die. We are like over 200 million people.
Do you think it's because we also like to explore our music?
Yeah, we do actually. We do. And even this Afrobeats that we're talking about, it's a conglomeration of different African sounds. Like this Afro pop thing that we're talking about. Yeah. This our Afrobeats. There's amapiano inside. Or everywhere there's log drum these days. Yeah. Or the amapiano template of music. Everywhere. But we're going to call it Afrobeats. Yeah. There was a time that it was pop from South Africa. There was a time that it was Makossa.
Yeah.
Even gospel artists were doing Makossa. Right? Yeah. So it's a conglomeration of different sounds. It finds roots everywhere. Like there's rap inside, there's R&B somewhere else, there's whatever. So there's Konto and Galala. There is a lot. It's a product of different genres. This is Afrobeats. That's why sometimes the Afrobeats thing makes sense. But what makes it going back to what we're saying about how people had a problem with it. When Afrobeats started rising up, the biggest African artists at the time were Nigerians. The biggest, the most bankable artists, the artists that you could export, the ones that their music were getting consumed, were Nigerian artists. And in the earliest days, the biggest African song that blew up in the UK was a Nigerian record. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the only records that have charted in foreign countries are Nigerian records. But even though Magic System, the record that blew up, Premier Gaou charted in Netherlands, in France, in Belgium, right? But a lot of people know that song, they don't know Magic System. Do you understand? Like when people know artists, that's where the culture is definitely going. They know the record. But people know Sunny Ade. Some people might not know his music, but they know Sunny Ade. You understand what I mean? But with Nigerian artists, a lot of people know the artist and they know the music. So with a lot of people, when they're saying Afrobeats, a lot of people don't even, like a lot of foreigners don't even realize that Africa is a continent. They think Africa is a continent. Do you understand? So to a lot of ignorant foreign people, Nigeria is Africa. Yeah. They don't know more than that. It's not their fault. So the fact that the perception of the world tilts towards Nigeria is a problem for the rest of Africa as well. Yeah. But we didn't create that. And even a lot of Nigerians now are ignorantly putting that Afro thing to mean Nigeria. It's not a Nigerian thing. It's not, at least it's not just a Nigerian thing. It's Africa. Afro literally is a short form for Afro is short form for it's short form for Africa or African. African. It's literally, that's what it means. Afro hair is African or black culture or urban culture. So a lot of people tend to mistake that for Nigeria. It's not just a Nigerian thing. Stop making that mistake. So the only reason the South African person is going to have a problem when a foreign person calls Afrobeats, Amapiano refers to Amapiano as Afrobeats is because they don't want to have to do that with Nigeria. We created our thing. You understand? Yeah. That's why they have a problem with it. Whereas that person is not, as much as that person might be wrongly looking at it from a Nigerian lens, Afrobeats is not exactly just a Nigerian thing. Does that make sense? Because the person that even came up with it is Ghanaian.
Okay, so is Afrobeats a genre?
It is. At least it's an umbrella genre. It might not be as particular as you want it to be, but it's an umbrella genre in terms of contemporary African popular music. You can just say, so if you're going to describe if I want to describe some records, even on pause sometimes, I would say Afrobeats, Afropop, maybe Galala, whatever. You break it down. So maybe like 4 genre descriptions to give someone an entire idea of what the music is. Because if you're going to tell a foreign person that is Galala, you're going to scatter his brain. And then the exploitation of the sound might have a problem. Now it might be easier to simplify our sounds because the exploitation of African music is getting easier. We are chatting. We are getting certifications. Essence has happened. Love Quantity is happening. TikTok yesterday, for example, called it the biggest global hit of 2021. All these things are happening, right? So it's to break them down into, okay, it's Makossa, it's Amapiano, it's going to be easy now, right? But at the time, it was hard to pinpoint. So as an umbrella genre, yes, Afrobeats is a genre. Easily, it is a genre, but it is an umbrella genre that might not be as a compelling decision to pinpoint a particular sound. Because at the end of the day, aside from the fact that even the Nigerian part of it, the Nigeria's Afropop is a product of different African sounds. The Afrobeats itself, the beats part is an umbrella term to describe a wide range of African contemporary pop sounds.
Okay. So a lot of Nigerian artists like to draw their inspiration from other genres from different countries. So is Afrobeats then a genre or culture?
Honestly, it's both. It's
Why?
both. Hip hop is a genre. It can be a genre and it's a culture, right?
Yeah, true.
Rock music is a genre and a culture. Gothic music is a genre and a culture. Afrobeats is a genre and it's a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle. There's a whole building called the Shrine after Afrobeats, right? Some of the biggest genres are both, and one doesn't affect the other. Why should it? It shouldn't. It should not. It just shows you that the genre is getting bigger than it is, and it's something that affects an entire continent. So the interpretation is going to be different for everybody, and that's fine. That is perfectly fine. In the sense that right now, there is even like a way people look. African music is not just crossing over. African culture is becoming the taste of the world. People are using Ankara prints more now. People are tying gele more now. People are wearing Kampala more now. I mean, all these things are happening at the same time. So a lot of people are relating it back to Afrobeats. And regardless of how you look at it, it's a good thing. But the thing then becomes that even Afrobeats artists have a lifestyle. Yes, they do. Shout out to Osagi Alunge. Was telling me something some years ago, about 2 years ago, that turn off your TV. Like turn on your TV, look at an Afrobeats music video and turn down the volume. What do they look like? They look like rappers. They look like rappers. And they're the ones that are living like the rappers. They're the ones with the crew, they're the ones with the baby mamas, they're the ones that are making the news, they're the ones with the beef, they're the ones. There's an entire thing. An entire movement that looks like it. Afrobeats to the world that is impacting the country, impacting culture, impacting the way the ambition for a lot of young people, impacting the economy. Have you seen the projection by KPMG? Impacting the amount of money that's coming into the industry. Afrobeats to the world is why the foreign labels are back. Afrobeats to the world is why all the DSPs are here. Afrobeats, it's an entire thing, and it's a good thing. So why should we have a problem with it? Why? We shouldn't. We should not. Because at the end of the day, it affects the marketability of Afrobeats and the reception of Afrobeats and of our artists. Going forward, we will need to break people, to fragment it in the sense that, oh, okay, this is a trap artist. He's African. He's not an Afrobeats artist. He's African, but he's not an Afrobeats artist. Because right now, we are going, pop artists are the ones that are blowing up now. We are going to see rap artists blow up very soon. We are going to be exporting talent. So the distinction is going to be needed. Maybe with even with some Afro pop records that are Nigerian, call them maybe Lamba or whatever. Call them Konto Galala, whatever. The ones that are of Ghanaian origin, call them Pompompo or whatever you want to call them. The ones that are Francophone origin or Congolese origin, call them Suku Somakusa. All these things are going to be necessary. But at the root of it, right now, it is both. And that's facts only.